This drive through Walnut Creek, California during rush hour perfectly demonstrates why following rules of the road doesn't really cut it when you're sharing the road with humans that are the main character of their own stories. I wish I could tell you that interactions like this one are rare, but they're really not. There's a lot of examples of things like this in this drive that really showcase what full self-driving is up against. Sharing the roads with human drivers in their own little bubbles is not an easy task, as you're going to see numerous times throughout this drive. And although version 12.4.1 does have a lot of improvements in some areas, handling odd human behavior is one area I feel like we may have gone back a step or two. We'll get right into the full drive, which you're definitely going to want to see right after I tell you about this video's sponsor. Private internet access not only unlocks geo-restricted content by allowing you to route your internet traffic through 91 different countries and all 50 individual US states, but can also protect you against the prying eyes of hackers, internet service providers, and others who want to view and collect your personal data. They recently completed their second independent security audit, proving their no-logging data policies to be true. In fact, they keep getting court orders with demands for users' data, but are literally unable to provide it in every case because they don't have it. How awesome is that? They're also completely open source, meaning if you wanted to see the source code for yourself and verify these claims, you can do so easily. By using my special link in the description, you can get 83% off and 4 months free, which comes out to about $2 a month. This single membership also covers an unlimited amount of devices and an unlimited amount of connections simultaneously, making it easy to share with every member of your household and protect all of your devices. They have support staff available 24/7 and also offer a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can try it risk-free. And thanks again to PIA for being a long-term sponsor of this channel. Alright, starting this drive off at the supercharger in Walnut Creek, California, and you can see the beautiful high-fidelity park assist visualizations here. Really hoping to see more of this get added to the autopilot visualizations, because unfortunately, once we go a few miles an hour, they all disappear. And you can see right after engaging full self-driving, it just comes to a complete stop. I think this was because the car had planned to make a right turn out of this parking lot, but I forced it to go left instead, and it needed a moment to kind of reorient itself. Also does seem hesitant to proceed here again. I think it was because that person was walking to the back of their car, and this version is extremely sensitive around pedestrians. One big benefit of the spring update is you can see there's now a map in the top right-hand side of the screen, which makes it really easy to show you where the car is planning to go and when it's rerouting and when our destination is, so really cool improvement there. This Model 3 to the right had been stationary for quite a while, and right when we were rounding the corner is when they pulled out in front of us. Classic oblivious driving there. There is a lot more of that in this video. You can see our navigation route shows a few sharp corners up here going through this parking lot, and while 12.3 did a good job with the turn signals, 12.4 is using them a little excessively. You can see the right-hand turn signal come on here, followed immediately by the left-hand turn signal, which isn't really how humans drive. It also does stop for this family crossing the street, but does stop a little bit too abruptly for my taste. I mean, realistically, it was probably fine. It stopped in plenty of time and with plenty of room. The mother didn't even look at us, but my expectation for the overall smoothness and the car's behavior has gone up quite considerably since version 12 released. Here you're going to see an area where 12.4 is significantly better than 12.3. This is a very, very sharp turn, and you can see the steering wheel turn all the way to the fully locked position, and it accelerates through the turn. If you use version 12.3 in parking lots very much, you'll know how massive of an improvement this is. It also does pass one exit that it easily could have taken, and instead gets us to the one that it wanted to take originally. Also, a tad slow exiting this parking lot, which was likely caused by the pedestrian walking in the middle of the street, and there was also an approaching car from the left. And as soon as they turn on their turn signal and begin making their right turn into the parking lot, it goes ahead and proceeds. So while not exactly perfect behavior through the parking lot, I do think that 12.4 is a pretty big step up over 12.3, especially in those areas where it has to make really tight turns. And I mentioned in my first impressions video that this version also does a much better job at staying away from curbs, but in this particular situation, you can see we have a sweeping left and it does get a little bit close to that right-hand side curb there. And judging by the black tire marks all over that curb, it looks like something humans struggle with quite a bit too, but at least it gave it a couple of feet of room, but probably closer than I would have gotten driving myself. Also wanted to mention, based on feedback from my first impressions video, I did a camera recalibration to try to fix the turn signal problems right before this drive. And as you can see right now, surprisingly, it's not changing lanes wildly back and forth. So I really did think that might have solved the problem, at least until a little later in the drive. Another change in this version is it seems to yield to a lot more cars than it used to. You can see this oncoming car was way in the distance and it still decided to yield for him. I don't think this is a bad thing. It's actually probably better when you're talking about Robotaxi, but definitely a difference from version 12.3 that used to take the right of way pretty much whenever possible. And I want to mention another thing that I incorrectly praised the car for doing was not proceeding into the intersection. Like you can see, this person in front of us is not proceeding into the intersection on this unprotected left, which makes them miss the light. Although my driving instructor told me not to proceed until I have a gap, and other states it is illegal to do that, it is not in California, so I was incorrect about that one. Sorry, guys. The navigation pin I chose is actually behind this house off to the right, which Full Self-Driving takes very seriously, and it tries to get us all the way to that pin, as you can see. I know the sounds the car was making as we went over that curb were pretty terrible, but it was just the mud flap, so it sounded a lot worse than it actually was. And while the car definitely did an excellent job of getting us all the way to that navigation pin that I set, it unfortunately does not have the capability to reverse yet. So this is when the car, I imagine, is asking for help, and I do have to intervene here to help it out and make a 3-point turn, which is an ability that is supposedly coming with version 12.5. I cannot wait to see it. Leaving this area, it's again carrying a little bit too much speed over this curb and not hitting it at an angle, which you have to do when you're in a lower car like a Model S or a Model 3. So because the Y has a little bit more ground clearance, I let it happen, but if you're in a Model S or a Model 3, that is something to consider. A wild matte black Cybertruck appears to our left, which is just crazy how often I'm seeing these out in the wild now. And as we're making this right turn, you'll notice that there is some construction work going on and the rightmost lane is completely closed. The car does a really good job of going extra slow and also hugging the left. You can see it's actually running over the rumble strips to our left right now to give as much room as possible to the construction zone to the right, which is really nice behavior. This wasn't a challenging construction zone by any means, but it's nice to see the car biasing towards the left of lanes to give as much room as possible. Coming up here, you're going to see a situation that genuinely confuses me and makes me rethink what I actually know about this version of Full Self-Driving. Since version 12 released, I feel like there's a pretty big disconnect in the autopilot visualizations versus what the car is actually doing. So while we're at this light, you can see it's actually highlighting the wrong set of lights. We're in the left-hand turn lane, and it's highlighting the lights to go straight ahead. Now, this does end up causing an intervention where I need to override the accelerator pedal to make it move. But the interesting thing here is that as soon as the light turns green, you can see the path planner want to take off. It wants to move forward right now, but the car is still staying still. Like I said, this did cause an intervention and also a human honk. But I find it extremely fascinating that the actual planner, the path planner, had the right idea and knew when it was time to go. And it seemed like the car was overridden with some other system. I'd really like your guys' feedback on what you think happened there, because I've reviewed that several times and I really don't have any ideas. Approaching this stop sign, you're going to see another area where I feel like version 12.4 has regressed slightly compared to version 12.3, where it's our turn to go here and the car seems to want to wait until the car to the right comes to a full and complete stop before proceeding. Stop signs in general are an area where I feel like Full Self-Driving needs a lot more polish. You're going to see a few more examples of stop sign issues later in the drive, but it just seems to stop for a little bit too long and doesn't seem very confident through them. You can see it kind of circling around here as we did reach our navigation pin, but there was nowhere to pull over. So after putting in a new navigation route, we go ahead and proceed. You're going to see some pretty derpy behavior out of full self-driving up here. Unfortunately, it's not the only time it happens on this drive. We have a right turn to make, as you can see in the navigation here, but it doesn't follow the road that leads right. You can see the navigation path kind of pinging back and forth, but it doesn't make that right and instead continues straight, but still has the right turn signal on and unfortunately does try to make the right turn, which causes our first real disengagement. Now, it is possible that it was going to swing wide enough to make that turn, but that is definitely not the proper thing to do, and I'd rather disengage and get that data sent back to Tesla rather than have it doing the wrong thing. And speaking of doing the wrong thing, we see a car halfway pulled out of the gas station just sitting in the middle of the road here. I think this person's strategy is just to not make eye contact by any means possible. And as we get into roads that are more traffic dense, you're going to see a lot more human driving behavior, even worse than that. And after we make this right turn, something actually pretty impressive happens. As you can see ahead, there is a tow truck towing a Bentley over in the right-hand lanes, which is not something you see every day. And full self-driving actually, without even signaling, just gives the tow truck a lot of extra room. Taking additional caution in areas like that is definitely some new behavior in version 12.4. Also doing a really good job staying smooth, even though the cars in front of us are basically asleep at the wheel and take forever to get going at this green light. It just squeezes right by them, and despite the bicycles and pedestrians in the crosswalk, it does a really smooth job getting through here. We also have to get into the left-hand lane to make the left turn ahead, and there is another human cutting across lanes randomly, as you can see right now. Turns out they wanted to make a left turn at this light, and instead of just going a different route like the proper way to do it, they just cut in front of traffic when the light turns green, which is just so typical. I know I give full self-driving a lot of crap for derpy moments, but to be honest, anytime I'm on the road, I see humans do a lot worse than what I'm typically seeing full self-driving do. Especially when the roads get slightly busier than usual, humans just seem to have main character syndrome, where they just don't care about laws or anybody else on the road and just kind of drive their own way without any consideration for others. And you are going to see an excellent example of that pretty soon. Another moment that could use some improvement here, you see there is a car approaching from the right, and we just take so long to come to a complete stop here that the car to the right actually stops before we do. So technically it's their right of way, but we approach the intersection first, and it kind of just makes an awkward situation. And another issue at the very next stop sign, where even though this intersection is completely void of cars, we're completely alone here, it stops and doesn't get going again. This just seems to happen sometimes in 12.4. I've had it happen at stoplights and stop signs. Not sure what causes it. I go ahead and press the snapshot button to send that data back to Tesla, and you can see even when I'm overriding the accelerator pedal here and I let my foot off, it again comes to a hard stop before taking off. Elon did mention on X that there are quote-unquote meaningful improvements in version 12.4.2 coming out soon, and I really hope that includes stop sign behavior, because stop signs in general seem to have gone backwards a step or two. 12.4 definitely seems a lot more capable than 12.3 in a lot of ways, but intersections in general just isn't one of them. At least in my experience so far. I know other testers in other areas have had very different experiences. Another area that I feel has improved quite a bit is the creeping to proceeding behavior. Usually, if it doesn't have visibility, it would come to a secondary stop, but you can see it creep forward and proceed in one motion, which 12.3 had a lot of difficulty doing. It really is pretty wild to see how different these versions behave from one another. This version excels in a lot of key areas where version 12.3 struggles, but then also seems to mess up at the simplest of things. I think this next iteration of 12.4, being the .2 update, is going to give us a lot of information about what to expect of the future of full self-driving in general, specifically when they change the models and do these big shifts like from 12.3 to 12.4. Like, how easy is it to fix these issues? And also, when do they just throw in the towel and start work on making 12.5 better? You can see a police officer turns on his lights to run the red light to do a U-turn through this intersection, which was totally fine until the light turned green, and it seems like Full Self-Driving kind of wanted to match his speed. You can see the car accelerate to the speed limit and then go well beyond the speed limit, speeding 12 miles an hour over right now before slowing down to a more reasonable speed, which felt way too fast. Coming up here is another area where 12.4 struggles compared to 12.3. You can see a line of traffic backed up to get to the freeway that's turning left here, and although our navigation route is straight, the car decides to just park itself behind this giant row of cars. 12.3 really never had issues around these areas and was always very likely to just go around the car with no problem whatsoever, but 12.4 seems to be really hesitant. You are going to see some other very similar situations play out a little further into the video, and although I did reset the cameras and everything, I'm still getting these random lane change initiations where it kind of just swings back into the lane. And in case you were thinking that was just coincidence, it happens again very shortly after. A lot of really odd problems like this in 12.4, and to be honest with you, I actually prefer 12.3 to 12.4, at least in its current state. 12.4 is probably more capable, but 12.3 just felt so much smoother. And as we're sitting here minding our own business, another main character shows up to our right, pointing that she wants to get in front of us. And I don't make eye contact with her at all, and she just kind of ignores and cuts us off even though our light turns green. Now, this would have been fine if she was getting into our lane. No big deal, but no. She's going all the way into that left-hand turn lane and stopping directly into the road, taking up the majority of the lane here. Unsurprisingly, this causes a horde of humans to start honking, and we do have to intervene to get the car across the intersection. And I don't mean to harp on this over and over, but that is yet another situation where I feel like 12.3 would have handled it much better, and it would have just gone around that car. This version feels like it's a lot less confident than earlier ones. Our destination pin is off to the right, and it seems like it wants to pull over to the side of the road here until this person starts stepping into the road, and it kind of just changes its mind about that. And after she clears our path, the car does awkwardly creep forward a little bit more and then comes to a complete stop until I put in a new navigation route. And since the car can't do a 3-point turn and actually turn around here, you can see it make a left-hand turn in here, which ends up being a pretty bad decision. You can also see the navigation route has updated, but it doesn't even realize there's a road that goes through here. So now it is driving completely on its own without the help of navigation. You can see it update a couple more times here, but it's not connecting itself to any of these roads around. The other thing is, even though there was no signage that pointed out that this was the entrance into a parking garage, this is the entrance to a parking garage, and there is no way out of here. Even if I wanted to back up, there is a truck who is approached from behind us who makes that impossible. So I seem to have gotten the car into a bit of a situation here. You can see it comes to a stop at this gate in front of us, but it is pretty stuck. I am now forced to grab a ticket out of here and manually drive the car through the parking garage because I didn't think there was any hope of it getting through this one by itself. Does make me wonder, what's the car going to do if there's no driver up front who can get a ticket for it to get it through a situation like this? Very interesting to think about. And coming out of this parking garage, there is a giant sign directly to our left, which completely obstructs traffic. What a great sign placement there. It does seem like it's able to see though, because it does proceed out into the street and gets into the left-hand lane because we have a left turn coming up, but unfortunately traffic comes to a stop and kind of makes us stop awkwardly here. The person in front of us did move up slightly when they saw us awkwardly stopped here, but the car just sits here, and I mean, I guess it's fine. It was out of everybody's way, but still just kind of an uncomfortable place to sit in the road. We have a left turn at the next light, and you can see the left-hand turn lane, and Full Self-Driving does not take the opportunity and just sits behind this car so that it doesn't have to touch these double yellow lines. Even when the car moves up to give us more room again, it is still not taking the opportunity. Yet another example of something that I can guarantee 12.3 would have handled no problem, but 12.4 follows the law to a T, which just does not feel natural in a situation like this. And another one where we have plenty of room to get by this car to the right and make our right turn at the light, and it's something we've seen 12.3 do so many times before really well, and instead it just sits here. I mean, if you go back and look, you can see the path planner flicker back and forth about whether or not it wanted to attempt to squeeze by the car, but it seems to just never actually do it. It seems like all the confidence has just been zapped out of 12.4. Elon did mention all the actual driving models like 12.3, 12.4, 12.5, etc., are all very different. And so far, to be completely honest, I am not liking the overall model of 12.4. Just not confident enough. The destination I chose ended up being at the top of this hill, which looks a lot like a private driveway. So I go ahead and intervene here again to back up. Not a fault of the car here, just a bad navigation route. Our new route has us going in the opposite direction, and because we're faced the wrong way, the car is kind of a little bit confused, and you can see it kind of slowly creeping down this road here. And it was stuck between 3 and 4 miles an hour for quite a while, until it got to the end where it has to make a U-turn in this court, and then it starts accelerating. We have to make a U-turn at the end of this cul-de-sac to get back along our navigation route, which this version usually does really well. But unfortunately, because there was a truck parked there, it is not able to swing out as wide as it wants to and just doesn't have the turning radius to complete this turn, which does cause another intervention. So as these interventions keep piling up, I wanted to mention something funny that Elon said during the shareholder meeting. Actually, probably not that funny, but he mentioned that the development of full self-driving is limited by the interventions that they're getting. Basically, that full self-driving is so good and that the versions that they're testing out, like this ones, are so capable that they're just never intervening and they're having trouble finding areas where the car struggles. So Elon, if you're watching, I think I might have found a good area for you. At this point, I realized that we're going through the exact same area where we had a critical disengagement for that stop sign last time, and I wanted to give the car one more shot to see if it would do the same thing. And surprisingly, this time, it handles it exactly like it should have the first time, and confidently goes along this road that it avoided before. The inconsistency that I'm seeing and the feeling of the lack of confidence makes this version really hard to summarize, in my opinion. I will stick to my statement I made during my first impressions video where I said this version feels more capable than 12.3 and does handle a lot of things better than ever, but it also feels like it's driving kind of like someone who's extremely nervous behind the wheel, and I feel like it's holding back a lot. Time will tell how much can be fixed in this version through updating it, but again, the question has to be asked, how much effort should go into this when this driving model doesn't even have the capability to back up? Elon mentioned that the next driving model, which will be in version 12.5, which does have reverse capability, will be here towards the end of June, which I know, of course, is going to be delayed, but it makes me think that if it's even close to releasing, time spent improving that one is probably better spent than polishing this one. But I really don't know what I'm talking about in these regards, and hey, it's handling a lot of these maneuvers, even with pedestrians and other cars around, pretty dang smoothly, so maybe there is hope for this version after all. I think I just prefer version 12.3's driving style a little bit more, if that makes any sense. So in summary, we really only had one disengagement that I would consider critical, where the car missed a turn and then still tried to make the turn when it really shouldn't have. That's not so bad though, but what is bad is that I'm also seeing a huge spike in intervention so far with 12.4.1, far more than I was ever experiencing with any version of 12.3. And after many videos I've released of version 12 driving very human-like and blending in on the road, 12.4 goes a step back in that regard, and we do have to reintroduce human honks to this counter list. I'm really holding out hope that improvements can be made here, and maybe these issues are actually isolated to my car, because there seems to be a lot of people that are extremely happy with 12.4, but so far at least, I cannot say that I feel the same. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, everybody, bye.